look like. Here in the picture you can see that there are totally childish skin and bones. Here you can see the spine is prominent, rib cage is prominent, and these are hip bones which are prominent, and there is no gluteal fat. And here, because of loss of gluteal fat, this skin is hanging loosely. These are the children of our own ward. Here, when on face examination, you can see there is no buccal pad of fat. Now buccal pad of fat is lost in the last stages of malnutrition. So, uh, uh, so here, if the child has lost even buccal pad of fat, this means he is very much emaciated. Now here, in other we, the children of Sam may have oral thrush, and here we can see the prominent rib cage. So in the sphere wasting, that how the child looks like, he looks like as skin and bones, which is also called marasmus. Now for examination we have to remove the child clothes, and we have to see whether child's ribs outline is easily visible, and does the skin of upper arm looks loose, and does the skin of thigh looks loose, and we have to also see from the back, and we have to see whether the ribs are prominent and shoulder bones are prominent, and is the flesh missing from buttocks. So in the sphere wasting, there are folds on the skin on the buttocks and thighs, as we have seen in our child, and it looks like wearing baggy pants, and there will be low weight for height. Here, these children with kwashiorkor, they may have bilateral edema. Here we can see the child is having pits over both the dorsum of the feet. So this child is having pitting edema of the both feet. Now, how we have to check the edema? To check the edema, we have to grasp the foot so that it's lies in our hand, and then we have to press thumb over the foot, and we have to press for few seconds, usually up till 5 to 10 seconds. And if the child has edema, the pit will remain when we lift our thumb, and this is the a sign of severe malnutrition. And the edema must be present over the both feet for labeling as malnutrition or kwashiorkor, because the single-sided edema, they may have other local causes like DVT or any other cause. So for labeling kwashiorkor, edema should be present over the both feet. And edema is the characteristic of kwashiorkor, which is a severe form of malnutrition. And now uh, so here, edema is the characteristic of kwashiorkor, which is the severe form of malnutrition. So for grading the edema, we say mild edema when it is present over just feet, and we will say moderate edema when edema is present over the both feet plus lower legs and hands and lower arms. So if the edema is present over the extremities, we will label it as moderate edema, and severe edema plus 3, we will label it as when there is generalized edema over the both feet, legs, hands, and whole the body, when there is generalized edema. So here, this in this child we can see the edema is up till over the shins. So this child is having moderate edema. Now here, this is the child where we can see there is generalized edema. There is generalized anasarca over the whole body. We can see the huge distended abdomen. Probably this child is having ascites as well, and as well as the child is having puffy eyes. So this is the case of anasarca. Now the dermatosis. This is the another sign of malnutrition, and it also most commonly we find dermatosis in the kwashiorkor. And here these are skin changes. Now how we can differentiate the kwashiorkor from nephrotic syndrome? Because in nephrotic syndrome there will be also generalized edema, and so these are the other changes, like skin changes. These are not seen in the nephrotic syndrome, and these skin changes are only seen in the protein caloric malnutrition. And secondly, if we have doubt regarding nephrotic syndrome, we can rule out that by using urine detailed report, and by excluding if there is proteinuria is negative, then this is most likely the kwashiorkor. Now here we were looking at there was this was areas of, we can see these are flakes of hyperpigmentation and multiple patches of hyperpigmentation, and then when these patches are slough off, they lead to skin, they lead to raw material, and with areas of hypopigmentation and hyperpigmentation. And here later on when these may convert into gross ulceration of the skin. So here we can also see that there is hypo plus hyperpigmentation, areas of hypo and hyperpigmentation. So here this is the child. We can see whole body there are hypo and hyperpigmentation and with raw skin. And here this is child, we can see hypopigmentation. And here the another changes, see the hair, how the child's hair are. In the kwashiorkor we find light discoloration of hair, and these are sparse hair and rough and sparse and easily pluckable hairs. Now dermatosis is more common in the children with edema. So in the marasmus, we usually don't see the dermatosis commonly unless it is associated with some degree of kwashiorkor. That is, in marasmic kwashiorkor, we may see these skin changes. Now a child, a child with dermatosis may have patches of skin abnormally light or dark in color, shedding of skin in the scales or sheets, and ulceration of the skin of the perineum, groin, limbs, behind the ears, and in the armpits. So this is very important to examine the whole body, especially groin area. And we if we don't see the groin area, we don't see the nappy rash, we can miss these skin changes. So examination of the whole body is very important, especially the nappy area, to see the dermatosis. And weeping lesions are present in the advanced stage, and severe rash in the nappy area is usually present. And any break in the skin can lead to bacterial infection, and when the skin is raw and weeping, this risk is very high. So this dermatosis and skin sloughing, it expose these children to high risk of having infection. Now grading of dermatosis, we can grade it as mild when there is discoloration, just we find discoloration or a few rough patches of the skin. And it may be moderate when there are multiple patches and arm or legs, and severe when there is flaking, when there is sloughing of the skin and flaking, leaving the raw skin material and fissures. This is called severe dermatosis. Now here this is the severe dermatosis. We can see the open weeping skin lesions over the legs and groin and few areas of skin are normal, but most of the skin they are showing ulceration. Now eye changes. Now, what are the common signs, eye signs we find in the malnutrition? And these you all will must know this, that mostly we find initially the photophobia. And vitamin A deficiency is very common in the kwashiorkor. So if we see any child who is keeping his eyes closed, we assume that he is having vitamin A deficiency, because photophobia is the initial sign. And then followed by a bite out spot. Bite out spot we don't see commonly in our clinical practice, but these are the superficial foamy white spots on the conjunctiva. And then we may find the eye signs of eye infection, that is pus inflammation and pus coming out. And corneal clouding. Corneal clouding means the cornea becomes opaque. And when the cornea becomes opaque and when it heals, it usually leaves scarring and with permanent visual problems. Here you can see this is the white foamy patch over the conjunctiva. So this is a bite out spot. And here you can see the corneal, this is keratomalacia, corneal opacity. Now corneal ulceration. Now when there is break in the surface of the cornea, this is severe sign of vitamin A deficiency. And if this corneal ulceration, if it is not treated, lens may be pushed out and may cause blindness. So corneal ulceration requires urgent treatment with vitamin A supplementation and atropine eye drops. Here this is a bite out spot. We can see the spongy foam like material over the conjunctiva. Now here this is corneal opacity is seen, and this corneal opacity, these are present, they don't they heal but leaving scarring, leading to permanent vision impairment. And here this is the sign of eye infection. Here this is corneal perforation. Now this is that checking the anthropometry. Now this is important because all our diagnosis is based on the weight and height, on accurate measurement of weight and height. So these are the our ward pictures of the patients. This is the weighing scale in which measures accurate weight even in grams. And here this is a length scale. And up till what age we take lengths? Usually we take length up till the 2 years of age. That is, length means lying height. And we check height, standing height, after 2 years of age. Now this is the height length scale. Here for checking the length on the length scale, a child should lie straight, and his both legs should be straightened and head should be straightened, and then we check this length. Now if we don't have this length scale available, we can check the length by putting the child over hard surface, and if there is any pillow it should be removed, and head and legs and body should be straightened. And then we can keep one book at the head end and one book at the foot end, and then we can measure the distance between these two books by measuring tape. So this is the our word picture by we is how to take standing height. Now standing for standing height we take it after 2 years of age, and for checking height Both feet of the child should be approximated with each other and with the wall. So both feet should be approximated with each other and with the wall, and body should be straightened, head should be straightened, and then we check the height. And if we don't have this height scale, we can make the child stand with the wall with foot approximated with each other and with the wall and head straightened, and then we put a tongue depressor over the head and we mark with chalk over the wall. Then we can measure the distance from our marked point to the floor to check the standing height. Now this is if for baby weighing scales are available with us, but if we don't have baby weighing scale, so in young children who cannot stand over the weight machine, this is the way, or any child who is sick enough and cannot or is unconscious, we check weight in this way. We once take weight of mother and child both, and then mother alone to have the baby's weight. Now this is checking front occipital diameter. Here we take maximum prominence over the frontal region, and then maximum prominence over the occiput to check the front occipital diameter. Now this is checking mid upper arm circumference, and here remember that we have to take midpoint of the arm, that is between two bony prominences of the arm. We have to first check the middle of that, and then at that middle point we have to check the mid upper arm circumference. Now this the tape by which this someone is checking the mid upper arm circumference. This is available from the WHO, and it has marks, colors over it: green, yellow and red. And if the mid upper arm circumference falls in green color, this means there is no malnutrition, and if it is falling in the yellow color, this means there is moderate malnutrition, and if it is falling in the red color, this means there is severe malnutrition. Now this is the checking of weight for height. So here in the chart, this is length, and here this is for girls weight, and this is boys weight, and here this is median. This is -1 standard deviation, this is -2 standard deviation, this is -3 standard deviation, and this is -4 standard deviation. So suppose height of the child length is 60 centimeter and weight is if the weight is suppose 4 kg, uh, then this is below second centile, so it is lying in the -3 standard deviation. And if the weight is 3 kg, then this is below -4 standard deviation. So in this way we can check weight for height. So according to WHO, we are normal nowadays for grading the malnutrition, we are using weight for height charts. Now why malnourished children, they need different care than the normal healthy children? Here the severely malnourished children, they need different care because they are trying to keep their essential organs working by reducing the amount of energy used. They stop growing, and they have decreased physical activity, and they have reduction in the work of heart, liver and kidney, and they have reduced pump activity at the cellular level, and they have decreased body response to infection, and they use body's fat and muscles for energy. They have malnourished children, they have visible changes and invisible changes. invisible changes, they have a thin and loose skin. They may have edema. They may have hair and skin changes. This means cellular damage. They have lack of appetite, and they may be miserable, irritable, and apathic, especially more commonly in kwashiorkor. So these are the visible changes. We are found thin, emaciated children with obvious wasting, and here is the child with angular stomatitis, sign of vitamin B12 deficiency, and skin hyperpigmentation and hypopigmentation. Here, this is the child with very emaciated child. So this child is very emaciated. Here we can't find edema, but still he is having these skin changes, this rough raw skin exposed at the multiple areas. So they also have invisible changes. So in invisible changes, the liver cannot cope with the extra protein in the diet, and it makes less glucose. Heart is smaller and weaker and cannot pump strongly and can't deal with excess fluid. Gut wall is thinner and makes less digestive enzymes, and kidneys can't get rid of extra sodium and water. Cell walls are leaky to potassium and magnesium, and these both ions, they leave the cells, and while the sodium stays in, and immune system is less efficient. So that's the reason the severely malnourished children, they must be fed differently, rehydrated differently. So in normal feeds, if we give initially to the malnourished children, they will develop a refeeding syndrome in which they have severe electrolyte imbalance and which may lead to arrhythmias and even death. So they need to be fed differently. They need to be rehydrated differently, because in normal rehydrating solutions they have high load of sodium, and these malnourished children already they are hypernatremic, so this high sodium load can make them to CNS problems and acute kidney injury. Now treated, these malnourished children are treated with antibiotics without clinical signs. So even though they don't have any clinical signs, we treat them with antibiotics, and these are given specific nutrients and electrolytes. Specific nutrients and electrolytes are given, and they are given the special care. Now what's the criteria for admission? That is bilateral edema if present, or bilateral edema means if there is kwashiorkor, this child needs to be hospitalized, or there is severe acute malnutrition, that is mid upper arm circumference 115 millimeters or less than -3 standard deviation, or there is either any bilateral edema with severe wasting or medical complications. So if weight for height is less than -3 standard deviation, this is severe acute malnutrition, and this is and they need to be hospitalized. If weight for height is up till -2 standard deviation, this is moderate acute malnutrition, and they are usually not hospitalized, and they are treated in outpatient department. So criteria for admission is severe acute malnutrition or having bilateral edema. Or in infants who are less than 6 months, if either they have visible severe wasting or feeding difficulties or edema, they should be hospitalized. Now, important things to do and why. Now, presume and treat infection. Nearly all children with severe malnutrition, they have bacterial infection. As a result of usual changes, infections, signs of infections may not be present. So, in malnourished children, we assume that every child has infection. In severely malnourished children, because they don't have fever, rather than they have hypothermia rather than fever, because they are immunocompromised. And when body's immunity is not strong, they are more prone to develop infections. And similarly, the cytokines and these systems are not released properly, which cause fever. So fever and other signs of infection may be absent. Still, we have to consider this infection. uh, so next is the don't give iron in early period of treatment, because these malnourished children make less hemoglobin, and this iron may go into the iron stores. And giving iron treatment in the early phase may lead to making free iron in the body. And free iron is highly reactive and forms free radicals, which can has damaging effects. Free iron also makes the infections worse and promotes the growth of bacteria, and body tries to protect itself from free iron by converting it to the ferritin, which requires energy and amino acids. Now, important things to do and why. Provide potassium and restrict sodium. This is because child sodium pump runs slower, and sodium in the cell rises, and potassium leaks out of the cells and is lost in the urine and stool. Potassium should be given to all severely malnourished children, and magnesium should be given as it is needed for potassium to enter the cells and be retained. And sodium should be restricted in the feedings. And in diarrhea, Resomal, a special rehydration solution which has less sodium and more potassium than regular ORS, should be used. Now, important things not to do and why. That is, don't give diuretics to treat edema. Edema is partly due to potassium and magnesium deficiencies, and it may take 2 weeks to correct. So diuretic will worsen the electrolyte imbalance and may cause the death. Now, don't give iron during the initial feeding phase. So as we have discussed, we add iron only in the second week of treatment. And third is, don't give IV fluids routinely. So in routinely, we don't give IV fluids to the malnourished children because it may cause heart failure and fluid overload. And we only give IV fluids if the child has signs of shock. Important things not to do and why, in which don't give high protein formula in the early period. Over 1.5 gram proteins per kg body weight daily. This is dangerous because severely malnourished children, they are unable to deal with the extra metabolic stress, and too much protein could overload the liver, heart, kidneys, and may cause death. Be sure that in doctors who are appointed in ER, they should know all these measures which are to do and which are not to do. Now, define severe acute malnutrition. As we have discussed, and it is either edema of both feet, or severe wasting, means less than 70% weight for height or length, which is -3 standard deviation. So -3 standard deviation means weight for height is less than 70%. And in the management, no distinction has been made between clinical conditions of kwashiorkor and marasmus and marasmic kwashiorkor, because approach to their treatment is similar. So management is similar. So while managing, we don't consider whether this is kwashiorkor or marasmus. Now diagnosis. In severe wasting, uh, if severe wasting is present and less than 70% weight for height or length is present, this is our standard deviation less than -3. This is called marasmus. Or when there is edema of both feet, this is either kwashiorkor or marasmic kwashiorkor. If weight for height or length cannot be measured, then measured mid upper arm circumference. If it is less than 11.5 centimeter, this means this is severe acute malnutrition. And also we can use the clinical signs of severe wasting. And as we have discussed that there will be no fat in the subcutaneous tissue in the severely malnourished children. Now stunting, here stunting means that weight for age is less than 60%. That is, weight for age is less than 60%, and here the height is also short. So weight for height may be normal. So child may be short, weight is obviously low, but height is also low. So weight for height may be normal. So these stunted children who have normal weight for height, they don't need hospital admission. Now initial assessment of severely malnourished children, we have to take history regarding recent fluid and food intake, because we want to differentiate whether this is primary malnutrition or secondary malnutrition. So we have to differentiate by taking history about the fluids and feed, that is whether he was taking adequate calories or he was not taking. And usual diet we have to ask before current illness, and breastfeeding for how long it was given, and if breastfeeding was not given, which kind of feeding was given, and whether cow's milk or fresh milk, if or formula milk if it was used, what was the degree of dilution, whether it was adequate or it was over diluted feeds which the child was receiving, and duration and frequency of diarrhea and vomiting, and type of diarrhea we have to ask whether it is watery or bloody diarrhea, and history of anorexia, and we have to also ask the family circumstances to check the availability of foods, and to know the social background. And history of chronic cough is important because the TB may also lead to severe malnutrition, and any contact with tuberculosis we have to ask, and history of recent measles we have to ask, because that may also lead to this is a long, at least it takes 2 weeks to recover from measles, and in this period if adequate diet is not taken, child may develop malnutrition, and known or suspected HIV we have to ask. Now on examination we have to check the signs of dehydration and signs of shock. Shock means there will be poor pulses, tachycardia, and weak thready pulses will be present with poor capillary refill, and severe Palmer pallor we have to check. So in examination we have to check from head to toe. So in the head, suppose we start from the head, and we check the hair colors, their sparse or their discoloration or they are easily pluckable. Then we come back to eyes to check the signs of eye vitamin A deficiency, about corneal clouding, corneal ulceration, photophobia, white out spot, and then over the mouth we can check the angular stomatitis, and orally we can check the oral thrush, and we can see the loss of tongue papilla, and there on the skin we can see the skin changes of dermatosis, and over the chest we can see the obvious wasting as well as the signs of rickets, that is prominence of costochondral junctions, and we can check the nappy area for the evidence of nappy rash, and we can check the edema of the both feet, and on palm we can check the Palmer pallor for anemia, And if there are any signs of infection like abscess, cellulitis, or throat infection, we have, or signs of pneumonia, we have to see. And signs of HIV infection, that means severe oral thrush and hepatosplenomegaly or lymphadenopathy, or history of HIV in the mother or any other family members. And then we have to document temperature, because the fever though may not occur, but hypothermia, these children are hypothermic, and we will label as fever if temperature is above 99.5 degree Fahrenheit, or hypothermia when the rectal temperature is below 95.9, or axillary temperature below 95. uh, Mouth ulcers we can see, and skin changes, especially over the genitalia and nappy area. And these skin lesions in the kwashiorkor, they may resemble the severe burn with secondary infection. Now this is note that children with vitamin A deficiency are likely to be photophobic, and they keep their eyes closed. So it is important to examine the eyes very gently to prevent the corneal rupture. Now lab investigation for anemia, to check if there is severe Palmer Perler is present, then check for anemia. Now how to care these children severely malnourished. On admission, these severely malnourished children have to be separated from the infectious children, because these are immunocompromised children and they catch up these infections from other children. So they have to separate it, and they have to keep in the warm area, and they have to be constantly monitored, and washing is to be kept minimum, because they are already at the risk of hypothermia. So washing is to kept minimum, and if washing is done, the child has to be dried immediately. Journal treatment, it has 10 steps in 2 phases: the initial stabilization and then rehabilitation. Now this is the stabilization phase, which lasts for initially for first week, and then rehabilitation phase, which lasts for second week to 6 weeks. Now hypoglycemia, which we have to address in the first 2 days, and hypothermia and dehydration in the first 2 days, and then electrolyte imbalance, which we have to address immediately, and then it continues throughout till the rehabilitation phase. And infection we have to address for in the first week, and micronutrient we have to give for first week without iron, and afterwards iron with iron. And initial feeding is to be started in the first week, and then catch up growth in the second week to 6 weeks, and sensory stimulation is to be continued throughout the care, and then we have to prepare for follow-up. Now hypoglycemia, all severely malnourished children are at the risk of hypoglycemia, and immediately on admission they should be given feed or 10% glucose or sucrose, and frequent feeding is important. Now diagnosis, if there is any suspicion of hypoglycemia and where blood glucose results can be done, we have to check this blood sugar immediately, and blood hypoglycemia, we will document it as if it is below 54 milligrams percent. And if blood glucose cannot be measured, assume that child has hypoglycemia and treat it. And for uh, for treating hypoglycemia, if we have first feed of F75, give immediately, and then we have to give regular F75 every 2 hourly or 3 hourly. And if we cannot give feed immediately of F75, then if it is we have available 10% dextrose water, give it orally 50 ml. And if we don't have 10% dextrose water available, we can give sucrose solution by making 1 rounded teaspoon of sugar in 3.5 tablespoon of water, and it can be given orally or by NG. And then we have to give regularly 2 hourly to 3 hourly feeding during day and night to prevent the hypoglycemia, at least for the first 2 days. and hypoglycemia can be sign of infection, so we have to treat appropriately with antibiotics. And if the child is unconscious, we can give 10% dextrose water by IV, but by 5 ml per kg. And then monitoring, if the initial blood glucose was low, then we have to repeat blood sugar in the after 30 minutes. And if it is still low, below 54 milligrams, we have to repeat the 10% glucose or sugar solution. And if the temperature child is having hypothermia, then we have the hypothermia may be due to hypoglycemia, so we have to, if child is hypothermic, then also we have to treat hypoglycemia. Now prevention of hypoglycemia is by too early feeding, and this too early feeding is to be continued even at the night time. Now hypothermia, if auxiliary temperature below 95 degree Fahrenheit or doesn't record on a normal thermometer, this means child is having hypothermia, or if the rectal temperature is below 96. Now for hypothermia, we have to first correct the hypoglycemia. We have to feed the child immediately, and if necessary we can rehydrate, and we have to cover the child. Whole body should be covered, including the head. Head should be covered with a blanket or some cap, and we have to place the heater near the child, but not, it should not be directing to the child, or we should place a lamp near the child, and or we can use the kangaroo technique for warming up the child. And child should be covered with the warm blankets. And we have to for hypothermia, we have to correct hypoglycemia as well as we have to treat infection. Now monitoring, the take frequent temperature every 2 hourly temperature, and unless it rises to 37 above 37 degrees centigrade, or if we are taking rectal temperature above 36.5 degree Fahrenheit degree centigrade. And ensure that child is covered at all the times, especially at the night time, and keep the head covered, preferably with a warm bonnet to reduce the head loss, heat loss. And consider hypoglycemia whenever there is hypothermia. And we always feed the child every 2 hourly, starting immediately and even at the nights. And we have to change net nappies, wet nappies immediately to keep the baby dry, and avoid exposing child to the cold, especially during the examination. And child should sleep with the mother for warmth. And then we have to address dehydration. Now dehydration is overdiagnosed in the malnourished children because they already have wrinkled skin, so it seems that they have dehydration. So this is overdiagnosed and difficult to assess, so we assume that all the children who are having watery diarrhea, they have some dehydration. Now for dehydration, do not use IV route of rehydration except in cases of shock. And WHO standard ORS solution for journal use as a high potassium and a high sodium and low potassium, and this is not suitable for severely malnourished children. Instead we give special rehydration solution which is called Resomal. Now how we make Resomal, we use WHO ORS 1 sachet, and we mix it with 2 liters of water, and we add 40 grams of sugar, and with electrolyte mineral solution 40 ml. Now Resomal, it contains approximately 37.5 millimoles sodium and 40 millimoles potassium and 3 millimoles magnesium per liter. And this Resomal is given initially 5 ml per kg every 30 minutes for first 2 hours, and then we give it 5 to 10 ml per kg every hour for next 4 to 10 hours. And if rehydration is still continued at the 6 hours and 10 hours, then at the 6 hours we have to give, instead of Resomal we have to give F75, and at the 10 hours we also have to, instead of Resomal we have to give F75 in the same volume as the Resomal is given. And we have to monitor dehydration. During dehydration we have to monitor respiratory rate, heart rate, and they should be fall in this and the urine should be start passing, and there will be moist mouth and return of tears and less sunken eyes, and fontanel turgor will be improved, and we monitor weight gain and monitor rehydration half hourly for 2 hours and then hourly for 4 to 10 hours. But be alert for the signs of overhydration, because it may lead to signs of heart failure, so we have to check respiratory rate, heart rate, and if there is any rise in respiratory rate above 5 breaths per minute, or rise in pulse rate by above 15 per minute, then stop Resomel immediately and reassess at 1 hour. And next is the electrolyte imbalance. So these have deficiencies of potassium and magnesium, which may make 2 weeks to recover, and excess body sodium is already present, so high sodium diets cannot be given. Now we give for electrolyte imbalance, we give extra potassium 3 to 4 millimole per kg daily, and give extra magnesium 0.4 to 0.6 millimole per kg daily. And then we have to address infection, because we have already discussed that they don't have usual signs of infection. So we assume that all children they have infection. And how we treat infection? We treat it with this antibiotics, ampicillin and gentamicin, usually for 5 to 7 days. And then they have micronutrient deficiencies. We give these all children with malnutrition with vitamin A supplements. This is we give 2 lakh international units if child is above 1 year, and 1 lakh international units if child is from 6 months to 1 year, and 50,000 international units if the child is below 6 months. And in addition, we give folic acid tablet. Folic acid in the day 1 we give 5 mg, and following it we give 1 mg daily. And then we also give potassium supplements, magnesium supplements, zinc supplementations, and multivitamin syrup, and calcium supplements. And this is to be continued for 2 to 6 weeks. And in then is the initial refeeding. Now what we use initial refeeding? Now initial refeeding we use F75. Initial we use F75 and F100 formulas. Now F75, as the name indicates, it has 75 calories, and F100, which is used in the rehabilitation phase, it has 100 kilocalories. Now initially severe acute malnutrition, we give F75, and this is by volume we give 130 ml per kg per day, and we split it into 2 hourly feedings for first 2 days, and then next 2 days we give 3 hourly feeding, and next 3 days we give 4 hourly feedings by same 130 ml per kg per day. But if the child has edema, we can give 100 ml per kg per day. Oh, so how we make F75? We have different recipes. It can be made from the fresh milk, can be made from the dried skimmed milk, and in the ward which we are giving to our patients, we are making it by fresh milk. We are taking for F75, we are taking 330 ml of milk and 20 ml of oil and 100 grams of sugar and 20 ml of electrolyte mineral solution, and we fill it up till 1 liter, and this we use every 2 hourly. And then after 2 days we shift it to 3 hourly, and after 2 days we shift to 4 hourly, and after the 1 week we shift to it to F100. Now F100 is, as the name indicate, it has 100 kilocalories per 100 ml, and this 100 kilocalories this is we give by 4 hourly feedings by 130 ml per kg. Now this F75 was a low protein formula, that is 0.9 grams of protein per 100 ml. This F100 is a high protein formula, that is 2.9 grams of protein per 100 ml. So in this F100 formula, this is also called catch-up growth. So in this formula, child rapidly catches growth. Now in inpatient setting, where ready to use therapeutic food is provided as therapeutic food for the rehabilitation phase following F75. So we have two options. After F75, either we use ready to use therapeutic feed, but in the wards we don't have ready to use therapeutic feed, and we have F100, which we shift. But in the outpatient department, treating with moderate malnutrition, we are using this ready to use therapeutic foods. So once the child are stabilized, they have good appetite, edema is reduced, they are ready to move into the rehabilitation phase, usually in the second week of life, second week of admission. And here, if we use we are using ready to use therapeutic food, then this should be free water should be taken with it, because these formulas don't have high water content. And in patient where F100 is available, therapeutic food we usually use in the second week. Now, and we increase F100 when by 130 ml per kg when the child is taken. Then we gradually increase 10 ml in every feed unless some food is left over. And in this period, we also encourage to take other foods along with F100. Now, in infants less than 6 months who have malnutrition, the we first preference of R is breastfeeding, and if it is not available, then formula feeding, and if it is also not available, then we give diluted F100. That is, we take 2 parts of F100 and 1 part of water, and dilute it, and then we can give it to the children in less than 6 months. Now, discharge and follow up. When to discharge the child? When all clinical conditions or medical problems including edema are resolved, and the infant has good appetite and clinically well and alert, and weight gain is present, usually more than 15 grams per kg per day. And usually we discharge the child when he has recovered from -3 standard deviation to -1 standard deviation. And here immunization should be checked, and the mother should be involved in the caregiver. So thank you, that was all. Thank you.